Hello, everyone. I'm Valora, Washington, CEO of the CAYL Institute. That's day that I'm in a rural area of Ghana and the internet connection may be a little shaky, in which case CAYL's Chief Operations Officer, Brenda Gatson, will continue on with this webinar. We really thank you so much for joining us in this webinar series today, because every first Thursday of the month at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, we offer these webinars to bring you important conversations about children, families, and early childhood education. All of these webinars are always free, recorded, and available on our website. This webinar is being held July 11th because of the 4th of July holiday. After this webinar, you'll receive an email of resources to help you dig deeper into the issues that we're going to talk about today. And so we look forward to your participating and digging deeper into this topic. At the end of the webinar, we will be sending a link that you can to join the chat and live conversation with. We want to thank our initial sponsor, the Schott Foundation, for working to advance the next generation of early childhood educators. As part of our celebration, we thank the Schott Foundation for sponsoring this webinar series. We invite you to join us as one of our supporters, and if you can, please donate $20 to celebrate our 20 years of service. You can text CAYL to 53-555, and any amount of your gift, tax-free, will be gratefully appreciated. Throughout this whole year, we've been using the subject of Sankofa, the symbol, to remind us to look back and to move forward. When we think about Sankofa, looking back and moving forward, this concept of courage has been very present in all of our minds. And that's why we've had this webinar series all year on the topic of courage. And we've heard from many brave leaders in our profession who have shared their innovative and brave journeys as architects of change for children and early learning. And in this series, we've honored the past and we hope to inspire the future as we talked about systems change. And we've been asking you over the past few months to reflect on the historical challenges that have shaped early childhood education and to honor the trailblazers, innovators, and brave leaders who've laid the groundwork for the positive change that we see. If you've missed any of these episodes, please turn to our website to listen to them. But now we're going to move a little bit and pivot a little bit, not talking about just all the brave leaders, but asking you, how are you and each and every one of us going to show up with courage to face the important issues and dilemmas that we face? And as architects of systems change, we know that it is going to be our collective effort and commitment that are the prerequisites of change. So we have to emphasize the role of our collective commitment to dismantling barriers, redistributing power. We have to dive deeply into the root causes of inequality, discrimination, marginalization, injustice, and oppression. And only through a comprehensive and unified approach can we bring about the systemic change and pave the way for the future that we see. So over the next few months, we're going to shift our focus from brave people and ask how all of us are going to show up with courage. How can we be leaders showing up with courage to fund our field? How are we going to show up with courage to tell our story? How are we going to show up with courage for compensation justice? And these are the topics we're going to address in July, August, and September. A light on the innovative strategies and examples of action that are moving us forward. It's how we show up with courage to fund our field. Many people, it has been said, we are a field of feeling deprived, economically deprived. There are so many issues and projects that are trying to address this issue of funding. But what we want to do today is get on the balcony and look at this big picture with two state level leaders who have done and are doing important work for us to think differently and in new ways about funding the field. Financial struggles have always been a part of early childhood education, and people are still facing budget challenges, staff shortages. So this topic is still in the headlines. But we want to present some positive examples of things that are happening in these two states to fund our field. We want you to learn from these two states and think about what you can take away that might work in your own community. And think about the courageous action and innovative solutions being done in Connecticut and Massachusetts that might apply and be useful for all of us. So we're going to hear today from two of our most highly rated government leaders in our field. And that is going to be Amy Kershaw, who is the Commissioner for the Department of Early Education and Care in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She brings more than 20 years of experience in government roles in Massachusetts and in California. She's very passionate about public service. She has a deep commitment to collaborating with the diverse early education and care sector to bring more equitable outcomes for all of our children. And so we're thrilled to be able to hear from Amy today. And in addition to Amy, we are so delighted to welcome Beth by. Beth was appointed as Commissioner for the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood by the governor in January 2019. She's worked closely with the governor to think about funding the field. She served in the Senate from 2011 to 2019. She served in the House from 2007 to 2010. And now she leads this office that was created in 2013 to coordinate and enhance various early childhood development programs. So we are absolutely thrilled that we have Amy and Beth, Commissioners Kershaw, Commissioner By, to talk to us about the courage it's going to take to fund our field. And so welcome Amy, welcome Beth. We are so thrilled that you're here. Looking forward to you joining me as we begin our conversation today. So as you think about joining us, just love to have you here, Beth and Amy, as we're thinking about courage and the courage that it takes to fund our field. And as we've been talking with brave leaders over the past few months, I want to just start off by asking you, both of you, each of you, to talk a little bit about what makes you passionate about this work and how do you show up with courage to do this work? What inspires you to do this work? Amy, let's hear from you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Valora, and thanks to the CAYL Institute and your whole team for all the work that you do and for supporting conversations like this. And Valora and I have had an opportunity to work together over the years on many courageous things. So very happy to be partnering with you and as well as with Beth. We have worked on a number of cross New England initiatives. So pleased to be here. There are so many things that inspire me to show up, and from my family, which has a long history of public service and commitment to poverty disruption, to the incredible public servants that I've had the great fortune to work with. But I think the primary thing that keeps me getting up every day and coming in and making some of the hard choices is really my belief in the power of government to be a catalyst for positive change in the lives of the families that we're charged with serving. And I have had a career that has spanned state government, 3 different state agencies, our child welfare agency, our SNAP and TANF agency, and this is my second tour of duty at our Department of Early Education and Care, and what a moment to be here. And I think the thing that really inspires me to get to work every day is the impact. And, you know, when we made changes to our SNAP and TANF program to make it easier to get benefits or to bring greater dignity and respect to working with the agency, we affected nearly 1 million households in the Commonwealth. When we make a change that makes it easier to get childcare financial assistance for families in Massachusetts, that's 60,000 families who don't have to take time off of work, or make it easier for them to pay or waive fees for them. When we make a change to childcare regulations that improve the quality of care, we're affecting 230,000 families every day. So even though it can be really hard to make change in state government, when we're able to make those changes, the impact on the families is what gets me to keep coming back every day and make some of the hard decisions and push for the changes that all our kids and families deserve.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Beth, what inspires you to show up with courage in your work?
Well, I am so inspired by families and by early childhood educators. I feel so lucky to have worked in the field of early childhood all these years, for starting as a toddler teacher and now up to commissioner. And I should say over to commissioner, because certainly everyone in the classroom is as important as the commissioner. And today I sat down with 4 director level sort of early childhood educators and hear about what's happening. And when you spend time with young children and families, and you see what it looks like when they get what they need, you know it is life-changing. And if you spend time out in the field, you know we're not where we need to be. So let me just focus on why early childhood is so special and what inspires me about early childhood. One thing is, Valora, people like you. I think in early childhood, we have mentors, people who are leaders, who take time to nurture other leaders and bring each other along. It's just part of our culture. The other part of our culture, when you juxtapose it against other fields, is our focus on the family. We know the child operates within a family. We don't remove the child. We know that if we're doing our work right, that families really matter. And we also really think about relationships. And when we think about courage, it's often when you think about the most courageous times in your life, when you really stand up, it's because you have a relationship with someone. And that gets you going for the larger group. And in early childhood, we understand that. The other thing I love about early childhood is that we take time to understand child development and the phase where children are and try to adapt. We don't think we have the answer. We try to understand each family, each child, and adapt. I think we're unique that way. And I think that could be one of our strengths as we look to move forward and get more funding for the field. How do we adapt? How do we build relationships? How do we understand what young children need to fight for what they need? And finally, you know, I got pushed into moving into advocacy and public policy. I was pretty happy as a childcare director, but I kept losing teachers, and the low wages led to turnover. And I could see that impact on both the children when a teacher left and the impact on the families. That was someone they trusted who was sharing their child. My own daughter, I had 11 assistant teachers in a year and a half in an infant room. And so I got involved with Worthy Wages, which brought me to NAYC, which got me involved in my local school board. And so I think that the injustice of the wages really keeps me at it.
Wow. What a story. Really, that funding issues are foundational challenge in our field, right? What we want to hear, just take time to hear from each of you, some of the strategies that you're using to bring new funding to the field and to help us move forward and have the courage to move forward to fund our field. So I want to give each of you, before we get started our conversation, just talk a little bit about the strategies you're using. Amy, let's start with you.
Great. Well, I guess I would say overall our strategy has been around and. So we really been talking about the 2 critical levers that are essential to supporting the early education and care field, which has been underfunded for a very long period of time. we have this unique moment coming out of COVID where I think the rest of the world has woken up to what we all have known for very long about the importance of early childhood education for our kids and our families, for supporting the economic mobility of families, for leveling the playing field before children get to school, and really supporting the economic well-being of our communities. And so we have this opportunity right now to be really thinking about the childcare market, and which is not a functioning market. And in a functioning market, you would expect the cost of a service to cover the price of doing business. That what it costs to actually provide the service, you can charge that. And that is not the case in early education and care and childcare. So we have what we think of as a kind of a classic market failure. And built on that understanding, we've been really talking about the two levers that we think have to continue to be pressed in order to be able to fund the field, to create greater stability and financial health in the sector, to grow the sector and make sure families have access. So the first is purchasing power for families. So for families who need income-based assistance to participate in the system, to be able to afford early education and care, we have to press that lever very hard. And that means making sure that we are providing care to more number of families at higher income levels, but also that we're paying closer to the cost of care. So in Massachusetts, along with a few other states, we have really started to move away from what you think of as market rate within our child care financial assistance or subsidy system and move to a cost-based system. So we have, for the very first time last year, begun to base our rates of reimbursement to programs on the cost of care. We're not at 100% cost of care. I was just with a secretary from New Mexico. I think they're at 92% of the cost of care in their state. But we have to press this lever of family access and purchasing power by making sure more families who need help paying for care have access to that, and that we're paying closer to the cost of care so that they can have access to the quality of care that we know will help support their children, as well as help them go back to work, stay at work, and pursue their economic mobility goals. The second critical lever, and we've known this to be true for a long time, but again, COVID enabled us to demonstrate it, which is to support directly to early education and care programs. So in Massachusetts, we used our ARPA, or COVID era stabilization funds, to create a program called Commonwealth Cares for Children. And that is a grant, operational grant, that goes directly to programs to help support the operational needs of their program. And in Massachusetts, those funds are going in initially to cover sort of the enrollment fluctuations and gaps that were caused by COVID. But now it really revealed, again, what we've known for a long time, is that there's a big gap in the funding. So these operational grants are going into programs to support teacher salaries, to support stabilization of rent, insurance, to make sure there are behavioral and language specialists in the program. And many of these supports are going into the programs without costs being passed on to families, which is really essential because we know the cost of care is too high already. So we're pushing to continue to make sure that our system is funded by pushing these two critical levers to make sure that more families have the purchasing power in the market that they need, that are closer to the cost of care, and then continuing to fund through the Commonwealth Cares for Children program direct supports to families. To providers. I think we are actually one of the few states, and I feel very fortunate, where those COVID era funds are now fully state funded. So we have assumed, while most of those funds have sunsetted across the country and other states, Massachusetts, with state funding and the support of our governor and our legislature, have now fully funded those stabilization grants going forward. It's $475 million, and programs get operational grants. As a result, as many other states have seen capacity decreases, we've added 10,000 new spaces for kids, 7,000 new programs in the last year. We have seen teacher salaries go up by several dollars. They're still too low, but several dollars an hour, which is a significant increase that we haven't seen, all while mitigating the costs going onto families, which has been really important to make sure we're mitigating and keeping programs affordable. So those are a couple of the key strategies. It's really important to note that there's a whole bunch of other supports that come around those two key levers for funding the system, such as professional development. So we have scholarships that are going to early education and care providers so that they can pursue their 2-year and 4-year degrees and increase their own economic mobility. We have also pursued a pretty significant capital investment strategy so that at the same time that we're pushing the demand button by giving families more purchasing power, we're also pushing the supply button to try and make sure we have access to more care and families have greater number of choices. One other strategy I wanted to mention that, and I know a number of other states have done this, which is that we piloted a program and then made it permanent, which is to provide childcare financial assistance for staff working in early education and care programs. And this has been a really important mechanism, not just to support family affordability, because we know many of our families that are working in early education and care programs have low wages, but it's also been a really important recruitment and retention tool. So program directors have talked directly to us about being able to use those child care financial assistance as a way to recruit teachers in, maintain teachers. I've talked to a number of folks who've actually returned from the public schools back to early childhood where their heart is, because they're able to have their children with them and have their child care funded, which has been a really essential part of making sure that we're able to retain and recruit workforce. So I'm going to stop there. We are, I would say, in Massachusetts, turning over every rock and really trying to run through the door of opportunity of the attention and interest in early childhood education. So thank you for the opportunity to share with some of what we're doing in Massachusetts.
Brenda, you're muted.
Okay, my apologies. And I just want to thank you, Amy, for that wonderful rendition you gave us of all of the great things that are happening here, there in Massachusetts. Even though I'm here in Florida, I still consider myself a Massachusettsian, if you may. And there's a lot of food for thought that she gave all of us. And I hope those of you who are on the listening end have taken notes and can continue this conversation at another point in time. For those of you who might not know it yet, we have temporarily lost Valora somewhere in Accra, Ghana, but I'm sure she's going to join us when she's able to, because of her internet access. So I'm going to move on in her stead to bringing Beth Commissioner Bai, into this conversation. And that conversation and the question that I have for Beth is that we know that her state has just finished a major blue ribbon panel. It's a panel that came up with a big vision, and it required some big funding. So we'd like to hear a little bit from her regarding how she intends to get this fully funded and what are some of the outcomes that are expected as a result.
Brenda, I'm so happy to be here to share about the panel process, but I just want to start by saying thank you for filling in. I know it's not easy, but you're stepping up, like all of us have to step up sometimes to do things we're not quite prepared for, but I think you're ready. I just want to also note that Amy is a real leader in this country. Massachusetts, I would say Massachusetts and Virginia, the way they use those federal funds really set them up to try to be able to make long-term investments. They had that lever of saying, we're going to get this right during the pandemic and help programs survive. And they saw that that really helped them with supply. And we found the same thing, that the grants that we sent out during COVID made a big difference. We had been slowly losing family childcare homes over the past 20 years, despite a lot of efforts. But those funds, the money matters. It really matters in helping them hold on. So we were thrilled to have the governor ask us to really study early childhood. And part of this is because the governor is a real business guy, and he really wants to understand what's happening. And businesses were saying we can't open because of childcare. And every time I would go to explain it, he would go, this is so complicated. There's so many different ways it's funded, et cetera. And he's a super smart guy. And I think when I went to him and said, listen, Governor, what if we took a year, you appoint some folks to really look at this and think about it? And so he did. He had an executive order and he said, let's look at this. And I felt like it was my job to make the case for why this investment mattered at a time when there are a lot of strains on state governments, and governments were losing some of their federal dollars, were winding down. So what were we going to do? So the process really mattered, and I really recommend that states take a look at this and think, how can we make a plan? And the PDG funds have been critical, the preschool development grant funds to Connecticut in supporting some of this. But what we did was we took about 11 months, and Valora was our kickoff speaker, really got us going in Connecticut, starting with equity and why this matters. The big question that Brenda asked me that's so hard to answer is how are you going to fund this? And when the panel came out with its report, the headline was, there's an early childhood plan and it costs $2 billion. And I have a fiscally conservative boss who is my governor. So we had to really work with him to help him understand why it costs so much. And governors across the country are having this challenge. So we did that. So we started this year with really focusing on stabilizing the field and having an investment plan. And then it's a 5-year plan. The last 3 years are about expansion and sustainability. The governor's budget increased funding, $45 million as it was, and he added another $43 million in his proposal. So he understood early childhood was literally the only item that got new dollars these years. And I felt a little bad with my other commissioners looking at me who all had needs. But the governor came to understand, as did the 3,000 people we heard from when we went out to the field, and we really adapted it. So it was a very public process. I think you've got to bring the public along. You've got to make our issues understandable. And it increased, the final budget that passed really had about 60, 70 million more dollars for early childhood in the past. And overall, in the past 6 years, we're up 60% in state funding. Now we've also got some federal funding, et cetera. So having a process was super important. Now to get it funded. In Connecticut, we have a child care union, and they negotiated for increases. And when they came to the table and said, we want to stay in business, we want to expand, people understood, and they got a contract with an 11% increase each year for 3 years. And then we raised the whole field up by 11% a year for 3 years. So those are significant dollars for programs, and also families have more buying power, making it more equitable. We also have a 25% bonus for any accredited space. So that really helps families afford high quality settings, because the program knows they're going to get 25% more on top of the 33% increase. So this year, our first year, we feel successful. The House and the Senate passed significant increases. And then coming forward in the next 3 years, we're going to also look at access, allowing more families in, making sure we cap the costs. And then finally, I'll close with this. It's workforce, workforce, workforce. In Connecticut, we had a 13-step career ladder. We heard from the field, we can't do this. We looked at the unifying framework. We worked with the Council for Professional Recognition. We've really leaned into the associates and the CDA and apprenticeship, trying to give more pathways in. So I'll stop there because we want to have a conversation. But so we're hoping to get more funds. We're going to keep going, but the advocacy community really matters. They were unbelievable in Connecticut, and we're going to continue to rely on them. You have an inside out kind of approach. Both, you need the policymakers, but you also need the advocates.
I was hoping Valora was going to be able to connect with us, but it looks as though that's still not the case. So just moving it along, again, thank you, Beth, but thank you both for your comments. I think in terms of our general discussion, I wanted to ask or have you think about this. In September, CAYL is already planned to have a webinar on showing up with courage for compensation justice. But as you know, compensation is at the core of funding issues in this field and what people care deeply about, as it is so definitely and essentially tied to quality. So looking broadly across the USA as well as your own state, what are some promising initiatives for compensation that you see now or you see coming ahead in the future? And either one of you can take a.
Well, I would just say Washington, D.C. has been a model where they really built wage supplements into their budget. I think Massachusetts has been a model with their grants to programs with some wage requirements. And the work being done around, Amy, you talked about moving not away from market rate to cost of care. I think it's important that if you're doing that, that you consider like kindergarten teacher wages as your sort of starting point. So it's important as states build those models that wages are the driver of the cost of care. But Amy, you go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more, Beth. And I think, you know, we have seen, and I just put a link into our board meeting. So for the March 2024 board meeting, we presented a lot of data from our C3 program. So these grants that are going directly to programs, that's the Commonwealth Cares for Children. And we have over the years, as we've moved out of the pandemic and transitioned from what was a COVID era stabilization to much more of a now operational grant, we have the opportunity to direct more of the resources into salaries and compensation for programs. And we're seeing fairly significant increases. Again, wages are way too low, but on the order of $2 and $3, $4, $5 an hour increases for staff, which is really important. So being able to provide direct support to programs that they can put into their staff and then directing those resources. But the other key linchpin is, and many other states are ahead of Massachusetts in this, but we're trying to catch up, I think, is really having a meaningful career ladder. And being able to have a credential and a pathway so that when folks are coming into the field, we want them to be able to stay in the field, to grow in the field. So we are working finally on a career ladder and a credentialing pathway. And as we've continued to give those grants directly to programs, we've encouraged programs to support the professional development of their staff, and as their staff attain greater levels of professional certification or increase their credential level, that they are able to make commensurate increases in their salary. So I think you really need to pair both the wages and the funding to increase wages with a meaningful career pathway and a credentialing system that allows folks to feel like the professionals they are, that honors them and values them as teachers as they grow in the field, and then links salary increases. I think for years prior to us being able to have these operational grants, we would encourage and push and provide professional development opportunities for folks to be able to increase their educational attainment, and then there wouldn't be salaries that followed that increase. And how discouraging is that for someone? And they would be forced by making a choice, the best choice for their family in terms of their economic circumstances, to make a different move, whether it was to the public schools or out of the field altogether. So I think pairing both the kind of career ladder and the credentialing system with funds to be able to increase compensation as folks increase along the way is really important. I'd say one other thing, Beth, and I'll turn it back to you, which is that in our surveys of programs, including we have found that not only is the salary important, but the whole compensation package, how people feel valued. So for example, we have just increased the number of approved closure days that will pay for programs that are taking childcare financial assistance. We want to professionalize the field. We want them to have vacation time. We want them to have employee assistance. We want them to have flexible schedules. So being able to provide some resources that allow program directors to teach, to be able to support their staff with some of those other compensations, whether it's childcare financial assistance for their own staff to enroll, or vacation time that they can count on so they can be with their families, or flexible scheduling. So they can be, I think all of those things create a greater sense of value and professionalization, but wages, of course, it's number one.
Brenda, I want to just turn to family childcare for a minute, because in our listening, we really found that family childcare homes, first of all, with business supports, can really be a higher wage for the small business owner. And we, during the pandemic, worked with the State Small Business Association, the Women's Business Development Council, and developed business supports for programs, and had some specifically targeted to family childcare homes. We also were piloting family childcare networks throughout the state and did an RFP, and now have a regional family childcare network in each region of the state. And we're finding that programs can be more profitable, and we provide supports to get accredited for CDA, and those business supports we're in the process of turning into credits, so that then they get the small business training through the Women's Business Development Council, and then they can turn those into college credits, which is what sort of something we've been trying to do. But when it comes to family childcare, I think our listening sessions taught us families and neighborhoods value family childcare highly, and that they can flex to families' needs. And the providers are so excited to take advantage of professional development. I'll tell you a quick story. When we were negotiating with the union, we had 11% a year on the table, which is very high for any union negotiation. And they didn't sign it until we agreed we'd give them more money for professional development as well. And that just showed me this isn't all about how much they're being paid. They wanted to professionalize. And to Amy's point, we also have adopted a unifying framework approach with 3 levels, but that can work for family childcare or center-based care.
Thank you both. I wanted to fall back to one of the, both of you have responded to this question with regards to the advocacy and the advocates that are needed to help move these agendas forward. I mean, the things that you have both just mentioned, you're preaching to the choir here. All of us are believers. We'll do whatever we can to support those types of initiatives. But we need to be able to communicate with a larger audience and be able to get them to not just understand, but to support or even believe that these are important initiatives going forward. How can we communicate these facts to the larger public, to other policymakers or other stakeholders that are not necessarily walking this walk along with us?
Go ahead, Amy, first.
Sorry, I was just trying to get a link. There's so many good answers to that question, but the one I want to share right now is that our governor in January, actually on Martin Luther King Day, signed an executive order calling for a whole government approach to childcare and early education. And I will put the link to the website. But this is kind of a remarkable opportunity. So this is the governor calling on her entire cabinet. It is chaired by our Secretary of Education, our Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, and our Secretary of Economic Development, recognizing that childcare is both a critical educational investment as well as an investment in the economy and the competitiveness of the Commonwealth. So that task force has those 3 co-chairs, along with our administration and finance, our technology, our energy and environment department, our health and human services department, our public safety department, our transportation department. The entire cabinet that reports to the governor is charged with serving on this child care and early education and care task force to create opportunities across the economy and across state government, and to bring the resources that are needed to really create a more robust early education and care system. And I was talking to a friend about the task force, and they said, "Oh, does that mean all those people are going to be involved, like nose in your work?" And I said, "No, my nose is going to be in their business." because it's really about how do we bring the resources from the formal workforce system, from our economic development system, for transportation, for recreation, to bring bear in early education and care. So they're looking at, excess state spaces, and is there a way the transportation system could take better care of our early education and care providers? Is there a way our recreation department could be partnering better to make their programming more accessible and available? Are there ways that some of our public benefit programs could be shifted for our staff that might be accessing our healthcare programs or our food security or SNAP programs? So this is one way that, and our economic development. So the business leaders are at the table trying to figure out how to get more employees into their workforce. And they see this task force as a critical element to making sure that they have a workforce that they can tap into. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to educate across state government and across the sectors in the Commonwealth about the power of early childhood and childcare, both as education and as economic development. And I think we are just getting started. We have 12 listening sessions that are set up for this summer in Massachusetts, 7 in person and 5 virtual sessions. So we're going to be doing that in partnership with business leaders and families and early education and care providers. So some of the choir will be there, Brenda, but we're also bringing people far outside the choir to both bring them in as advocates and understand the importance and power of early childhood education and childcare, and also bring those resources into our system. So one thing happening, and I'll put a link to it in the chat.
Okay.
I do think, we have our standard early childhood advocates, and we have to think broader. I mean, just having a family childcare union that has organized family childcare homes has developed this whole other set of advocates who live in neighborhoods, have a lot of families they know, and have been wonderful advocates. I would also say Connecticut has a history of parent leadership training at the community level. And we started a parent cabinet 3 years ago in Connecticut where parents have some governance power and they learn about how the early childhood system works. And then they're linked to community-based parent ambassadors. I think a lot of times we want parents who are super busy to come out and be advocates, but they haven't built the understanding and don't always have the tools to know how to be advocates. And so having parent leadership training at the community level, and then having parents with real power over your agency has been important in building parent advocates. And then, I think we've all pivoted and gotten really good at talking about workforce, the power of workforce. But I will say, I think we need to be ready to shift and draw that through line from early childhood to mental health, to wellness. Jack Shonkoff has been asking us it's not just all about school readiness. We got stuck there. There are way more long-term savings in health. And there's so much worry now about disengaged youth and mental health crises in school. And I mean, we have more kids than ever showing up as 3-year-olds needing supports. So we have to start in those earliest years. I think really focusing on how important those earliest years are for building the sort of the foundation for wellness, mental wellness, physical health, school readiness, all together. So I think we've got to broaden our message beyond school readiness. And I think governors get the workforce thing. I think our next hill to climb is to make that key connection between wellness and early childhood.
Okay. Thank you both for those answers, because I know I've been furiously writing notes here, and I don't even know if I captured everything. Thank God we're recording this, because there's just so many pearls of wisdom in what each of you had to say. And I do think that as leaders, what you have talked about for the last 30 plus minutes is about showing up with courage. And as we think about and apply Sankofa to this discussion, what tips do you have that you can offer to not just those new to the field, but to those veterans out there about continuing to show up with courage?
I'll start just by saying, it doesn't happen fast. We wish it did, and COVID actually helped us speed some things up as hard as it was. But sometimes I talk about my work as pushing mud uphill, because you get some of it up, but then you're also facing headwinds. And I think we have to understand there are other critical issues for families, like housing, education, mental health supports, having a good job, getting jobs that pay a living wage. But we can't stop. Even though sometimes we don't feel heard, we have to keep standing up with courage. And we're tired. I know a lot of us are tired. I'll tell you what inspires me is I'll come home and I'm sort of tired after a long day. And then I go on the call with 20 family childcare providers. Half of them still have kids. It's 7:30 at night. And I know they're keeping kids safe with parents who have to work other shift. Families are under more stresses and strains than ever. So I try to keep them in mind when I think I'm tired. We have to think of the inequities in this field, all the women who are underpaid, who are holding our workforce, our country together, and just keep moving forward and understand that progress is slow. I'll finish with this. I found a picture of myself with my daughter as a 1-year-old on my back at a Worthy Wages protest in Stamford, Connecticut. My daughter's 31. And by the way, she's a social worker working on gender equity issues in New York City. So she too is working on women's wages. But it's been that long that I've been trying to get worthy wages. And Amy and I will tell you the wages are nowhere where they need to be still. But things are a bit better, but they have to be much better, and we can't stop. So I think you have to be aware that it's a struggle sometimes and it's slow, but we have to keep those young children in mind. I think of my 1-year-old granddaughter, and I think of those family childcare providers and center providers who are working so hard for not enough money.
You know, I think I started out by saying that I've been on this journey through state government, and it started in 2005 when this brand new Department of Early Education and Care was created. And I spent 5 years there, and then I was at Department of Children. Early childhood never left my heart, but I worked in the child welfare system, and then I worked in our SNAP and TANF agency. And I've been back just a little over 2 years at Department of Early Education and Care. And personally, I'll just say, I thought, I had moved on in my career, and I came back and just fell in love with early childhood again, because of its power for making change for kids, for families, for their economic circumstances, and for the whole economy. And the other thing that makes me feel very hopeful, and that I hope those who are in the field, both veterans and new to the field, is that this is a unique moment for early education and care. We haven't had this experience before. I know we've been at it a long time, Beth, but I feel like there is a level of understanding and attention and media interest and interest from employers and business and higher education. And I'm in a K-12 conference right now, and they've got a bunch of sessions on early childhood. I can tell you that did not happen in past years. And so we have a window of opportunity. And I guess the tip I would say is stay together. I think we are a field who has had a very scarcity mentality naturally, because there's been such a scarcity of resources. And I think now is the time for bold action and collaborative staying together around and courageously saying what the importance and the power of early childhood education is, and advocating for the resources we need and the families and the educators who need us to do that for them too. So I think if I had to reduce all of that to 2 words, I would say stay together. Because I think if we fight amongst ourselves, we're gonna lose our momentum and the opportunity for true, impactful, transformative funding and change, which is what we have the opportunity for right now.
Amy, I'm so glad you said that. And Brendan, I hope you don't mind if I just add on. Yeah. Staying together is so important. And the fear can get in the way. I know in Connecticut, there's a great fear of public schools and what they mean. But I mean, 19,000 kids are served in public schools and 17,000 in state-funded childcare. And I've talked to you about family childcare. We have a mixed delivery system, But every time a school opens a preschool classroom, the town's private providers, private childcare centers are like out there fighting it. I opened a magnet school that for early childhood, 300 kids, but it took 2 referendums to pass it because the childcare programs were fighting it. And so I think we have to think that high quality settings for children are everywhere. And where there is public investment coming, we've got to think about it. And so in Connecticut, like we're allowing programs to shift preschool spaces to infant toddler spaces. We never did that before. Because if public schools are offering preschool, we know we don't have near the infant toddler supply, but we also have to pay at the right rate. But I think the stay together really, Amy, is a favorite thing I've heard today, because as commissioner, I end up in the middle of these moments when people are so afraid, you know, and afraid that their businesses are going to shut down. I understand it, but we see Washington, D.C. and New York City and certainly Connecticut and Massachusetts, we believe in mixed models and they're working. But every time a part of that model gains or takes away, doesn't mean like we can't have that scarcity mindset. We've got to have an all children mindset. The best possible way to get the most possible children and families in programs that support them. So I just wanted to add that on, and that might be controversial because I know the minute I say the word public school in Connecticut, it's like.
Well, I want you to know that what stayed with me is what you just said, having an all children mindset. So I'm going to keep that in my head going forward. I have one last question, but before I get to that, there was a question there are a couple of questions that are in the chat that has to do with what are some of the steps people can take if they want to look at unionizing this field in their various states.
Amy, do you guys have a union?
We do have a union, and we just finalized a 3-year contract, which included rate increases for our family child care providers and increased vacation days, professional development funding, and a number of things. I mean, I would suggest that if folks are interested in hearing about that, they should contact the unions because that's where the organizing comes from. But we just finalized, our family child care providers who take child care financial assistance are represented by SEIU Local 509 in Massachusetts, and they've been incredible partners for us. And they, I'm sure, would be happy to talk about their organizing efforts in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I'll just say in Connecticut, we needed to pass a law first, and I was in the legislature and brought that law out, and it was a very, very long debate about the union being able to organize. So it starts with, you know, having a union, to Amy's point, but it might start with having the statutory authority to establish a union in your state. I think a lot of times there's fear of union, but you can hear from Amy and from me that for us, it's been a way for family child care homes to be organized. And the conversations aren't always pleasant, but that's what shared power is. We've got to be careful to make sure that the providers have power in our systems. And I think the Blue Ribbon panel really gave the providers power to come out and speak to the governor and speak to other people, speak their truth. And so I feel like as a leader with courage, you have to be courageous to be uncomfortable in situations and take risks. And it's not always going to be comfortable, and you're not always right.
Thank you. My last question is, I hope, a quick one for both of you, but I'm going to ask you to be clairvoyant a little bit. In terms of this conversation we've just had, 3 themes have pretty much come up consistently: funding the field, workforce issues, and mixed delivery systems. I'd like to hear from both of you what you think each of those things will look like in the next 5 years, if you had to project where we will be on either one of or all of those issues 5 years from now.
Go ahead, Amy.
Well, this is tricky business to get into predicting the future, but if I follow my line of hope through, I would say we're going to be a much more resourced system, that we're going to be a greater professionalized and recognized and valued workforce. We're going to be both, and I think the point of the the public schools and the early childhood community working together are going to be really, really essential to us being able to move forward collaboratively together by putting kids and families and their choices at the center of what we do. So I feel optimistic that 5 years from now, we're going to continue the path that I see us on in Massachusetts. And we have a lot of challenges. We're still underfunded. Our teacher salaries are not there, but the trend line for growing the number of programs and growing salaries and professionalizing the field and having the kind of recognition that early educators deserve. I feel like we're all the signals are heading in the right direction. And I think that staying together part of it. I was at a visit with the governor at an early education and care program, which I have been a number of times over the last year, which is quite remarkable. And I was talking to an early educator who had just gotten her BA degree, and she was just so proud to be an early educator. And I thought, yes, that is exactly what we want the message to be going forward in the field. I want to be an early educator. I can be an early educator, and I can make a career of this and feel feel valued. And so that's the path I feel that we're on for the next 5 years. And it's going to take us continuing to have 2 feet on the accelerator and taking advantage of every opportunity. And whether that's collaborating with our public schools or working with business leaders across sectors, I think it's going to be really important. And but I'm hopeful for what the next 5 years are going to look like.
I think I'm optimistic and pessimistic based on what happens in the next election. We were 1 vote away from doubling Connecticut's childcare budget, period. I mean, probably quadrupling what came from the federal government. One party voted entirely against the bill, and one party came up 1 vote short. And I'm not going to get into like who to support, but see, we need federal funding to continue to increase. And it's a drop in the bucket compared to military spending and that kind of thing. So I do think I'm very optimistic if we get leadership that believes that the federal government has a role in things like the child tax credit. And don't think something like the child tax credit doesn't impact us, because family poverty is entrenched and housing issues are huge. And when the kids come to our door, if they don't have structure and routine, it's difficult. So there's that. But I think what we're going to see is that there'll be more pathways and simplified pathways into the field. Wages will improve because they have to for the field to stay open. And I think families are going to step up and say we need more affordable care, and that hopefully local and state and federal governments will be responsive. And I think we're going to see more valuing of family childcare as a critical tool for families and communities, like just staples in communities for families.
Thank you both. I can tell you that this has been one of the most informative conversations or webinars that we've had in terms of this topic, and both of your participation has been just wonderful, and we are very grateful for it. We are going to start showing in the rolling screen that everyone can join us in the next Q&A session, where if you like to continue and have a more in-depth conversation directly with our 2 panelists, you'll be able to do so in that Zoom meeting room. So we have put that up. We hope that you will all join us in the next couple of minutes. And we thank you again. Valora, I don't know if you are still able to participate in terms of talking to us, but just in case, maybe you'll be able to join us in the Zoom. But I thank you on behalf of Valora and CAYL for this wonderful discussion we've just had.